Tim, thanks so very much. I was having an amazing day until that champagne thing. Really, truly, it was a world-class day, and then the whole thing went down in flames. It's true that I went to J. Sarah this morning and toured the facility and talked to a bunch of the parents, and then was able to preach at the all-school mass, which was profoundly moving. It was just very beautiful to be there, and then up to St. Michael's Abbey for lunch and a tour of the Abbey, and then to Christ Cathedral as well. And it's just wonderful to see so many of the things that God is doing here in Orange County and has done. And it's really moving to be here and to see that the efforts of so many people, chief among them probably Tim and Steph Bush, what that's meant to the church here. And that we should all be able to gather tonight in the basking in the glow of their hospitality is amazing. Aren't Tim and Steph Bush amazing people, everyone? A testament to how amazing Tim and Steph are is that they're having this dinner tonight in honor of a Msgr. I've never heard of anything like this before. You know, popes get things and cardinals and bishops, but Msgrs always get jacked at least squat. And so to have a dinner in honor of a Msgr is just a wonderful thing. And so I couldn't miss this invitation for anything because it's such an unusual occurrence. My first pastor, when I was a brand new priest, was, I think, a little bit bitter about never being a Msgr. And so he had a saying, which I think is quite true. He said, Msgrs are just like Boxelder bugs. They have spots, and no one knows what they're good for. And so to gather tonight in honor of this great Msgr Herron, who assisted Pope Benedict XVI, and who passed away at a young age, having given his life to the church. That's a beautiful thing. And so I'm grateful for that. I was also happy to come out here to California because it took me back to an incident in my life, an act of foolishness in the year 2022. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you remember, but in 2022, in November of that year, the largest lottery winning in all of history was claimed just about 2 hours north of here in Altadena, California. It was sold to a man whose name was Edwin Castro at Joe's Service Shop for $2.04 billion. That was a huge lottery win. The slogan of the California lottery is "A little play can make your day." A little play can make your day. I remember that and was eager to come here in such close proximity to that historic event because I was driving around in my car in Bismarck, North Dakota in November of 2022. And I turned on the radio, and there on the news was the report that the lottery winning was going to be bigger than anything in history. And I had never bought a lottery ticket before, but having heard that news, I pulled into the parking lot in front of the gas station closest to campus. And I bought a lottery ticket for the first time in my life. And then I drove home as quickly as I could and turned on my computer, and this is what I put into Google. If you win the lottery in North Dakota, can you stay anonymous? I just wanted to know if I won this lottery, if I could stay anonymous. Because in some states you can, and in other states you can't. Evidently in California you can't, because I know the name of Edwin Castro, who won $2.04 billion here. A little play can make your day. That's the motto of the California lottery. The motto of the North Dakota lottery is, never gamble to win back losses. I was relieved to see that if I won with this lottery ticket, I could remain anonymous because we were in the midst of a capital campaign. And raising money is not easy. It's very, very hard. Even if you make it look easy, It's very, very, very hard. And so I had this plan that if I won, I would begin to make very large anonymous donations to the University of Mary. And everybody would say, that Msgr Shea, he is so good at fundraising. I don't know what he did, but he found a couple of anonymous people who just love what they're doing at the University of Mary. And he just did a very good job. But then I didn't win. Edwin Castro won instead, because you have a better slogan for your lottery. In the year 2008, there was a slogan of a different kind that began appearing all over the city of London. Everywhere you went, you could see it. It was on the sides of buildings, on billboards, on the sides of buses. It was another kind of slogan. It was sponsored by one of the four horsemen of the new atheism, Richard Dawkins and his friends. And the slogan was, there's probably no God, so quit worrying and enjoy your life. Everybody could see it. That slogan. There's probably no God, so quit worrying and enjoy your life. I want you to pause for just a moment tonight and think with me about some of the people who would have read those words. London, like all the large cities in the world, is filled with moms and dads whose little children are sick and dying. People who are desperately lonely, lost in life, who have been kicked to the curb and thrown away. People in the grip of cruel addictions. The unemployed, the destitute. Refugees from war zones who have seen those closest to them raped or blown to pieces. People who are the victims of grave injustice or abuse of some kind. Imagine those people reading those words, enjoy your life. The preacher of the papal household, Raniero Cantalamessa, once said, and it's true, that atheism is a luxury for those who live privileged lives, who have everything at their disposal, whose lives go along just as they're supposed to. But atheism is a philosophy, a viewpoint of life, whether it is formal atheism, a rejection of the possibility of the existence of God, or whether it's the kind of practical atheism which runs through our veins and is all around us in this post-Christian age. A practical atheism where God might exist, but if he does, it doesn't matter. That philosophy of life, formal atheism or practical atheism, is inadequate as an explanation for humanity, as an explanation for human life. It cannot account for the lives that we live. It cannot account for all of the deep sorrow and tragedy, or the joy, or the triumph. A vision of life like that takes something like suffering and makes it something that's confounding, an insoluble mystery, a mockery of those who hurt. No, that road only leads to discouragement, then to darkness, then to doom. It's inadequate. What then is adequate? We know the answer to that. We know the answer to that. What's adequate to human life is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the answer to the question that is every human person. And when he was dying upon the cross, there was another slogan that hung above his head, crowned with thorns. And that slogan was, "This is Jesus of Nazareth, he's King of the Jews." And it was there so that none of us would ever have to ask this question: who is that person who comes into our dark and fallen world, bearing a love so infinite that it can go to the very deepest and most hurtful parts of human life? and blast apart our despair and give us new hope in this valley of tears. And that's a slogan that we can bet our lives on. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, King of us all. And yet, though we know that, you and me, though we know that we, by God's grace and his goodness and his mercy in our lives, has given us to know the Lord, has given us an explanation for why we're here and what we're doing. How do we behave? We run home and we Google, can I win the lottery and still stay anonymous? Can I have been given, we've won the lottery. The truth that's been entrusted to us is beyond human thought. The love that God has revealed to us is too much for us to take in. If it weren't true, it would be too good to be true. We've won the lottery, and yet we spend too much energy trying to stay anonymous with it. And we can't. Because we know that if we keep our faith to ourselves, if we take the gift that we've been given of the truth about God and the world and ourselves that comes to us through the gospel, if we keep that to ourselves, it will corrupt and grow small. It only grows if we give it away. It only grows if we give it away. Our faith, its power to save us, depends upon our willingness to witness to it. And this is right at the heart of the gospel. Here, we cannot but pause and remember that great towering figure of the 20th century, Pope St. John Paul II, elected to the chair of St. Peter as universal shepherd of the church in 1978. His first encyclical, remember, was Redemptor Hominis, which became a blueprint and a Magna Carta for the whole of his papacy. The unpacking of the mystery of the human person and the permanent missionary mandate of the church. Always, always to preach the gospel and never to be afraid of doing it, because Jesus Christ is the answer to the question that is every human life. I remember the day he died. It was the 2nd of April 2005. I remember because I was associate pastor at the cathedral in Bismarck in those days and a young priest. At that parish, at the cathedral, I was serving with that old pastor who said that Monsignors were like box elder bugs. And he had a practice where he would have confessions every Saturday night from 7 to 8 p.m. And that had happened for generations. He had been pastor there since I was 2 years old. I always thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. And I said to him, Father, that's ridiculous. Saturday night is when people are out sinning. Why have you scheduled confession? He said, you young priests, you try and get in here and upset the apple cart all the time. We have confessions at the cathedral from 7 to 8 p.m. because people depend on it. And we're going to have confessions during that hour. So shut up and do your job. And that was the right thing to say to me. It was the exact right response. Well, you remember when John Paul II died, that was a Saturday night. It was the eve of the Feast of Divine Mercy, a feast in the octave of Easter that John Paul II had given to the church. So it was Saturday night. The bishop came over to the cathedral and said that we should ring the bells. And then he said the first Mass that night for the repose of the soul of John Paul II. And then at 7 o'clock, as I was supposed to do, I went into the confessional. You know, the old pastor, he was right. Some people did come to confessions during that hour every week. Maybe we'd get 5 or 6 confessions, and they were good confessions. Every now and then, a family would come and bring all their kids. And they would all go to confession one after another. The younger the kids got, the easier the confessions were. At a certain point, you felt like you were being stoned with popcorn. On the 2nd of April, 2005, I went into the confessional at the cathedral in Bismarck at 7 o'clock at night. And I heard confessions without even 10 seconds of pause between them from 7 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the morning. That night I heard confessions straight through from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. I absolved every single one of the 10 commandments that night. People came in and said, "Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I haven't been to confession in 40 years, 60 years, 70 years." And that night, when I stepped out onto the street and walked across to the rectory, I looked up at the stars. And I knew that there was a natural explanation for what I had witnessed. He had been Pope since 1978. Lots of people didn't remember anyone else. And there's a natural explanation. When something that seismic happens in human history, you examine your life. And I think people thought, if he can die, I can die. I should get my life in order. That's a natural explanation, and it's a good one. Oh, but there was another explanation. I knew deep within that in my young priesthood, I had been given a singular grace, that I had been in the front row seat as the first graces from that magnificent life came flowing down from heaven. That on that eve of Divine Mercy Sunday, as John Paul II had gone to be in the house of the Father, I had been an instrument, all unworthy, of grace and mercy, which was inspired by him, his sufferings, his sacrifices, his prayers, his holiness. And it made me think back to 1998, when I first arrived to study in Rome, toward the end of the papacy of John Paul II. There were 45 of us in my class at the North American College. We arrived in late September, and in October, just a handful of weeks after that, we all went down to St. Peter's Square. And there, the Pope, John Paul II, was celebrating a Mass to commemorate the 20th anniversary of his election to the chair of Peter. I was so excited to see him. All of us were. We wanted to be like him. We were standing on the doorstep of our lives. So much possibility in front of us, and here was our chance to see the person of such a deep inspiration and to learn from him, to sit at his feet and to hear what he had to say. Well, we were not ready for what he said that day. It was a Sunday, and the gospel was from the 18th chapter of Luke's gospel, where Jesus asks this question: when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith upon the earth? The gospel was read. All of us sat down and waited for what the Pope would say. And to our amazement, his homily was based upon that phrase: when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith upon the earth? And in front of all of us, John Paul II began to conduct a public examination of conscience, asking in front of all of us whether he had done enough in his service to ensure that when the Son of Man returns, there would still be faith here below. We couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. There he was, his place in history already secure, all that he had done. The fall of communism the new catechism, World Youth Day, the canonization of almost 500 saints, his voyages all around the world, all of his preaching, all of his teaching, all of his courage in the midst of oppression, studying under the Nazis, studying under the communists, solidarity, everything. And there he was, humbly in front of all of us, asking, when the Son of Man returns, have I done enough that he should find faith upon the earth? Couldn't believe it. And it was a lesson that that's not a question just for popes. It's for all of us. This is a question we should look in the mirror and ask ourselves every single day. When the Son of Man returns, have I done enough? Have you done enough to ensure that he will find faith upon the earth? Because we've won the lottery. We know the truth. Have we helped others to know it? A couple of years later, he believed, John Paul did, that God had put a hand on his shoulder and asked him if he would lead the church and the world into the new millennium. He believed that this was his task given to him by God. And so in the great jubilee of the year 2000, he convened the youth of the world in Rome in August of that year for World Youth Day. Do you remember more than 2 million showed up from all over? And he called them together in vigil at Tor Vergata outside of Rome. And that night at the vigil, he got up and he preached to them. And he said to the young people of the world, he said, listen to me. It's Jesus that you seek when you dream of happiness. Jesus is who you're seeking when you dream of happiness. He's the one who's waiting for you when you're attracted to anything that's beautiful. It's Jesus who gazes into your hearts and reads there your most genuine choices, the choices everyone else is trying to stifle. It's Jesus who will not let you settle for or be ground down by mediocrity, but instead who invites you to live a great life. And then he said this, you remind me, all of you young people, you remind me of the morning watchman. And of course he was referring to the 21st chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah. The morning watchman, remember, who stands upon the gates of the city, gazing into the darkness and the drear to see what news is coming. And suddenly there gallops up a man who is drawn by chariots with this message, fallen, fallen is Babylon and all her idols within her. He said, you remind me of that morning watchman. Because in the century just past that we've just emerged from, which was the bloodiest and the most violent century by far in the history of the human race, during that century, great gatherings of youth were convened all over the world in places like Berlin and Moscow. And young people in those gatherings were taught how to hate and sent out with marching orders that they should fight and kill each other. I gather you here tonight for a different reason. I send you out to ensure that life is protected from the beginning to the end, from conception to death. That you should not ever be content to rest until the world knows the truth, until there's no one left who's homeless or illiterate or ignorant of the gospel. You, my young people, are the morning watchmen, the sentinels of the dawn. Those words still ring in the church today. We are called to be morning watchmen, not to be ground down by mediocrity. It's so easy for us to be weary in our task of evangelization because we forget what the point of the Christian life is. We measure our efforts illegally according to worldly measures of success. I say illegally because God has forbidden us to assess the effects of our efforts on his behalf. And the enemy wants us to do that so that he can discourage us. One time, I spent 4 days in an intellectual formation seminar with amazing people. One of them was an abbot who was dying of cancer. We had a sharing of graces at the end of our time together. And this old abbot turned to all of us and he said, "I've been a monk for 60 years, and I thought I'd be farther along by now than I am. I've been a monk for 60 years, and I thought I'd be farther along by now than I am." Do you ever feel that way, weary or discouraged in the midst of your life, wondering what your efforts are for? It's important for us to remember that if we open the pages of the New Testament, nowhere do we find life with God described as an achievement. It's never described that way. The New Testament speaks about life with God as an endurance, a perseverance, a steadfastness. John Paul II was quoting in his homily on that sunny October day in 1998 from the parable of the unjust judge. Do you remember? The widow comes to the unjust judge again and again, plaguing him that she should receive justice from his hand. And Jesus does something at the beginning of that parable he almost never does. He explains to his listeners what the parable means. Remember, he never does this. They're always saying, "What's he talking about? What does that parable mean? Explain to us the parable." But this time he breaks from his protocol. And he told them a parable about the importance of praying always and never growing weary. It's a parable about perseverance. A couple of chapters later, Jesus says, describing the coming of the Son of Man, "By your perseverance, you will secure your life." St. Paul constantly is speaking about how we are called to be steadfast, to endure, to persevere. We see it in the 5th chapter of his letter to the Romans, the 6th chapter of his letter to the Galatians, the 6th chapter of his letter to the Ephesians, when he says, "Put on the whole armor of God and be alert with perseverance." It's in the letter to the Hebrews. We're meant to endure so that we can be like Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. It's all there. God has set things up so that we should be given the grace not to succeed, but to persevere. And he has arranged things. This is extraordinarily good news for us who are tired, so that if we don't give up, we always win. He's put his hand on the scale. He's cooked the books. I point at Tim because that's an inside joke, not because he cooks the books. God has arranged everything so that our perseverance is what allows us to secure our lives. In the midst of discouragement, when we're disheartened, when things don't seem to be going our way, in the midst of all of that, how can we ensure that when the Son of Man returns, he'll find faith upon the earth by never giving in and never giving up? In Ephesians, St. Paul says that we're meant to stand. It's a strange thing, because you ask, is that the best we can do? Why not charge once more into the breach? Why not allow our veins to pulsate with something like Shakespeare's recreation of the Battle of Agincourt in Henry V, the speech of St. Crispin's Day? But stand? That's what we're called to do. And the enemy knows this. This is an ironclad rule of the spiritual life. The worst he can ever do to us, for all his fuming and fomenting, for all his ferociousness and all the smoke and mirrors and dust and sulfur, he's so weak. Because the only thing he can do, now that we know the Lord, is to get us to give up. And if we don't give up, we always win. And so then our perfection, our holiness, depend upon that steadfastness of heart. And that's something that we can't do alone, which is the importance of gatherings like this. The hospitality that Tim and Steph offer to us tonight is not simply meant to titillate us, to make us happy. It's meant to fortify us and to strengthen us for winsome and cheerful battle, that we should go forth from this place to bear witness to the one who will never be vanquished. We fight at his side, and we never give up. That means that through his grace, our efforts, though meager and small, will ensure that when he shows up again, and it may be this very night, he will find faith upon the earth. Thanks for listening, everyone.